You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
Alrighty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and joined as always by your co-host, Kevin. Kevin, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. Doing good. We've been getting a lot of rain down here in South Texas. I've had about 8 inches, just over 8 inches here in the last 2 days at the house. So good problem to have. And, it's been dry down here for the last couple of years. So I'm not going to complain about the rain, but it's been a little wet. I finally, I don't know the exact measurement, but I know I've had enough rain that my pool in the backyard was overflowing. I have not seen that yet in my time down here, but it finally breasted the brim of the pool and was starting to runneth over, if you will. So that was kind of cool to see.
That's funny.
Other than that, we are done with hockey. We're done with the NBA. So I've officially moved on to the College World Series. That has been extremely entertaining. Pretty much all the way throughout, right? There's been a couple blowouts, but for the most part, they've been really, really good games. So, Derek, your Sooners got my Bulldogs by 1 run yesterday and put them into the losers bracket, but Georgia overcame by beating Texas for the second time in the tournament and knocking Texas out. So now I get to hopefully get a second crack at your Sooners starting tomorrow. So we'll see how that goes. But I very much enjoyed the College World Series and even the Women's College World Series. I think it's back to the collegiate aspect because I still find professional baseball a little kind of slow and drawn out, and it's just not quite my thing. But I've really, really enjoyed watching these college athletes get after it and just kind of the camaraderie that the team has, just seeing – the fans. I like seeing the parents. I think as I get older and as our kids continue to grow up and everything else, like you start to relate, like, holy cow, like what a really cool moment for these kids, but even for their parents getting to watch their kids in that situation. So just different seasons of life and kind of how you relate to it. But that's been my sports entertainment on top of, just kind of, continuing to kind of poke away, keep my eyes around and looking through rosters and just kind of players and the little bit of news that we are or really not getting. It was another kind of slow news week for us. But overall, man, it's good. It's really good. So, we're in the middle of June. This is what we have to look forward to. We got a month and a half basically before training camp starts. Nah, not even a month and a half, about a month before training camp starts. So
Right.
I'm super excited for that. We're going to start getting some real good news. We're continuing to do player rankings, within their position. So we'll finish out tight ends tonight and continue to march forward to draft season.
Right. Yeah, it'll be fun. Be definitely a good time here coming up. One of the other things, right? We've got the U.S. Open being played this weekend. So another major in the golfing aspect getting played. So that'll be interesting to see how that one comes out and what that looks like there. Some of the kind of the only thing that I've heard rumor wise, news wise, those types of things kind of coming through there is some of the ongoing saga with this Brandon Sorby deal where looks like now may be leaning towards entering the NFL draft on the supplemental side of things, and everybody kind of has an opinion one way or another on that one. And you're even starting to see some teams kind of come out with some of their opinions on whether or not they're going to be drafting him or not drafting him, and you're able to really see where some of these coaches and GMs play the put their politicking hats on as they're speaking about this one. So kind of an interesting ordeal to see how that one comes through. But
have you seen across many of your fantasy leagues, the dynasty ones specifically, like everyone's freaking out trying to how they're going to handle this supplemental draft? And my stance, and I'm not saying it's right, but my stance is, guys, he's not going to be a starter anytime soon. if you run on a fab budget, your your commissioner, let everybody know, hey, he's going to be available starting this day. So if you want to put a waiver claim in on him, have it be, whatever that day is previous. Have it in by that night, by the time you go to bed. When waivers run, if you have the winning bid, congratulations, you have him. But I don't understand. People are talking about, bidding draft picks and resetting fab budgets to do this and everything. And I can't wrap my head around this, Derek. Like, he was not a out of this world college quarterback. He was solid, but he was not a Andrew Luck, a Peyton Manning, Caleb Williams. Like, he was not this caliber. And the fantasy community, this is what we're guilty of as a community, is we freak out and there's someone new and, oh my gosh, we have to have the shiny new toy. Like, guys, what are you going to do when you get him? You're going to stick him on your taxi squad for a year, maybe 2 years, and then you're probably going to cut him, because wherever he goes, he's going to get buried. It really worries the crap out of me that all this is around alleged gambling issues. Like, he would have been better off going the Josh Gordon route and popping hot for marijuana. And teams, I think, would be a lot more forgiving about that than they are about the alleged gambling issues. Like, they are. I think there's a lot of teams really worried about this, and they don't want the bad press. They get enough of it with their veterans sometimes. Not all, some. But they're not going to bring in a kid for all this talk and have the media surround this kid and bombard him with questions and, oh, how's he look? And, oh, is this a quarterback controversy? And like, teams don't want this. Their rosters, they feel like their rosters are set here for the moment, getting ready for camp. They're trying to install playbooks and formations and getting these rookies up to speed. So the Sorsby deal, for fantasy purposes, if you're given a vote, my suggestion is let it run on fab. If a player or owner in your dynasty league decided to blow most of their fab doing different roster constructions, or how some guys kind of just dump a bunch of old veterans and then spend a ton of fab on rookies who didn't get drafted because they're just trying to rebuild and they want that shot in the dark, I'm sorry. If you have $5 left and I have $100 left in fab and I get him for $6, and that's your deal. You're the one who chose to blow your fab budget instead of waiting to see what was going to happen in the offseason. So that's my TED talk about how to handle Sorsby, because we've wasted a lot of time as an industry talking about a player who's most likely not going to amount to anything.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, right? I saw some folks kind of coming out and trying to say that he was a first round talent in this last draft class. I mean, maybe that the outside of Mendoza, it was a pretty weak quarterback draft class on this one, right? Like,
let's stack him up 2 years ago,
right? And that's where I was going to go next. Was kind of looking at holistically and looking back historically on that one, right? Like, if you're putting him in that same draft class that had Caleb Williams and Bo Nix and
Drake May and
the 6 quarterbacks that were taken in the first round,
Jaden Daniels, he's not making that class.
Oh, he's maybe a second or third round pick in that draft class
if he's lucky, right? Because there was a big gap. We went first round and then what, 5th?
Yeah, it was a ways, right? Like
maybe he goes in the 4th and breaks the streak, but I'm with you, Derek. I don't see it. Decent college quarterback, maybe with some raw talent to potentially be a grooming project in the NFL. I see career backup more than I see, solid starter.
Right. The other thing to look at that too, right? Like, we talked about that last week and some of that with the how some of these guys that have had some of the gambling things come up and the allegations and the penalties that were with that and all of that, these weren't guys that, and like it or not, right? He's a quarterback. Quarterbacks are held to a different standard when it comes to the, how the teams and organizations view them and what that looks like and all of that, because as the quarterback, you're inherently a leader of the team, right, wrong, or indifferent. So I do think that there will be some of that ultimately comes into play and how that evaluation and what that looks like moving forward. But to echo those thoughts again, right? Like there's a lot of the dynasty leagues that I'm in that they're just going crazy around how do we figure this one out and how do we try and implement that. Fab is a good idea. Make people wait it out and go, okay, cool. Like he's in next year's rookie draft. If your rookie draft hasn't already happened, right? Like, or if your rookie draft has already happened, stick him in the next year's rookie draft, right? Like do it that way. If your rookie draft hasn't happened, which, right, for the most part, I'm a big fan of kind of waiting until you start getting through rookie mini camps. You kind of start getting in the very early time frame of training camp to start happening for that to be when you draft your rookies, because then you're actually getting some of these insights and what that kind of looks like and what their roles might be. So, can drastically change how some of those rookies are drafted. But if you've already had your rookie draft and you're trying to figure this one out, Fab, let him ride out the year and put him in next year's draft class and for your rookies and go from there. But a lot of people lose their minds when you put in that, hey, just let it ride for the year and stick him in next year's draft class. So, we can go ahead and move on from there. Any other news notes that you want to talk about here before we start looking at the tight ends?
Let's see. The Denver Broncos made a couple moves. They extended Sean Payton. Still had a couple years left on his deal, and they got in front of it. Like they've been apparently this Walton Penner group's been really happy with what Payton's done as far as the turnaround for the Broncos and getting them set back on kind of the right track, right? Historically, the Broncos have been more competitive than not and really went through a down stretch and a losing streak after Peyton Manning retired and trying to find the right quarterback and everything else. So they rewarded Sean Payton with a contract extension. Good for him. And he followed that up by convincing the team to sign the the USFL Player of the Year. Is that who this wide receiver was? Hakeem something. Anyway,
yeah, it was Hakeem Butler.
Hakeem Butler, that's right. So I need to do a little bit more research before I comment on that, other than he did really well in the USFL. And typically when players get these high-end accolades, NFL teams will bring them into camp, right? There's no guarantee that he's going to make the roster or anything like that, but the Broncos were able to get him so that way he can come into camp, see how he stacks up with the rest of this receiving core that the Denver Broncos have. Maybe they catch lightning in a bottle, maybe not. My biggest fear with these, because of how the seasons run between the NFL, the USFL, and everything else, like they just finished their championship. And so his body needs time to heal. Like, again, they're still playing football. It is not the high-end NFL level football, but it's still a very physical, grueling season that they play. They still take hits. They're still getting the practice time in and maybe not quite to the extent, but the NFL doesn't really touch anybody in practices anymore anyway. So camp, yeah, maybe because he's more game ready than not, but still I worry about, even if he does make the roster, can he last the season with just playing the USFL season? So again, time will tell. We'll see how he shakes out, but player to at least put a pin in, right? We can do our little homework. Like I said, I haven't gotten to that yet. I've been tied up doing some other things, but he's a guy that we'll look at, and maybe by the time we get to receivers, we'll have a bit more information on him.
Yeah. The Broncos also signed a cornerback and returner from the same team from St. Louis. Sean Fresh, they also added there, right? He led the UFL with the punt return yards this last season. So they did that, right? And they also released a couple of guys as well to make room on the kind of this an early roster type of deal. But yeah, these guys are kind of brought in to be camp buddies and try and compete for a spot. So it'll be good to see how that one comes out and how, if they are able to actually make that 53-man roster or what that looks like heading into that. So but yeah, it'll be it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, right? Because the UFL is kind of becoming that second chance for some of these guys to kind of go in and try and be that proving ground to try and make their way either back into the league or make their way into the league that may have not necessarily gone their way come draft night. So any other news notes that you want to hit up here? All righty. Let's go ahead and start heading into the tight end and the positional rankings there. We're going to start off with the guy kind of currently going around tight end 16 off the board, and that is Oronde Gadsden, tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers. Last year finished tight end 17, 69 targets, 49 receptions, 664 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Oronde Gadsden? That's one.
Starting off on that foot already. Again, young player, 22 years old, following kind of his father, who was a wide receiver, I believe for the Dolphins for a lot of years. Had kind of 2 massive breakout weeks in the middle of the fantasy season, and then was hot and cold. So the big week that kind of broke him out, he went, 7 of 9 for 164 and a touchdown against the Indianapolis Colts. Followed that up, going 5 for 5 with 77 and another touchdown against the Minnesota Vikings. But then after that, it was streaming tight end level is really what it was. 15, 31, 21, 33, 52, 15, 52, 11, 37, right? So if he can stay healthy, this might be about where he ends up. Obviously no Keenan Allen, but they also brought in David Njoku, and so that makes me really kind of want to fade Oronde Gadsden when coming into the offseason and really up until about a month ago when they signed David Njoku. I was kind of looking at him like, hey, okay, maybe I can get this guy if I'm waiting on tight end and, put some pop into an offense that's going to be continuing to focus in on the run. Their offensive line's healthy again, so maybe he's not going to be on the field blocking as much. He's going to be able to release. But now with both tight ends, it's not really worth the gamble to me at this point. Like, either I'm going to wait a little bit longer or I'm going to make a decision before he comes off the board here. So 2 tight end leagues. Yeah, he's not a bad second tight end to have. Single tight end leagues, I think I'm either going to take a guy on either end. I'm either going to take a guy that has a safer floor or I'm going to take a guy that has a higher ceiling and has a little bit more pop behind this, what he showed on average. So not a bad player, young player. Maybe he does take another step, but I think for now, Derek, I'm putting him on wait and see list. Like, he's not a complete fade by any stretch, but I am going to wait and see. Like, and I think that there's a good chance that even if he does get picked up in the draft by somebody in the league that you're in, you could see him be put on the waiver wire inside the first 3 weeks, unless he really pops, as teams start to kind of shuffle around and figure out what the roster is going to look like.
Yeah, fair enough. This one for me is maybe a late round dart throw. Like this is not one of those that I'm looking to actively try and put around Gadsden on any of my rosters. And the only reason that he stays in the late round potential dart throw for me is the standpoint that Mike McDaniel is the offensive coordinator for the Chargers this year. We have seen Mike McDaniels really through those offenses be able to have some breakout types of success for some tight ends, right? Like Jonnu Smith a couple of years ago, fantastic season for him with that. And we could very well see some of that kind of play in here. However, the problem is too that you've also seen not only David Njoku come in, right, who also is a athletic, big body type of tight end that can get out, catch passes, and get down the field from that position, which Orenda Gadsden does have some of that flash and that athletic profile that makes him intriguing at that standpoint. But they also brought in a very much a blocking tight end with Charlie Kolar here as well. So when you see these two tight end sets that for the Chargers to run, or you see them really try and do some power running type of thing, I don't know that we're going to see Gadsden on the field for those. And, the less opportunities, less that you're on the field, less opportunities for some of those breakouts on a play that breaks down or dump off type of pass, things like that. So that could eat into that a little bit, because I would think that I do think that Njoku is probably a little bit better blocker than Gadsden is, as well as the fact that you also saw the Chargers bring in a fullback that was in Mike McDaniel's system down there in Miami with Alec Ingold as well. So this is one of those that there's some intrigue from the athletic profile and what Mike McDaniel's offense has looked like, but not enough that I'm going to be actively looking to put him on any rosters. And this is, I don't even know that I can be as high as you are with that kind of wait and see approach. This is a pretty hard fade for me on this one. So, any other thoughts on Orenda Gadsden?
No, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and head up the tight end coming off the board right now at tight end 15. That is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews last year, tight end 16, 70 targets, 48 receptions, 422 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Thoughts on Mark Andrews?
I'm not quite sure what to make of Mark Andrews this year. And again, we're changing head coach. We're changing a bit of offensive philosophy. He really seemed to struggle after week 11. And even his week 11 output wasn't very good, 14 points, and it was tight end 4. But after week 11, kind of just fell out of bed. Like he was no better than tight end 2 and spent most of it in the tight end 3 range, even 4 range for the back half of the season. So I understand the name appeal with Mark Andrews. Again, this Ravens offense has to do something. Derrick Henry's another year older. Their window is slightly closing, right, with Lamar Jackson, and trying to figure out how to manage this team with him and have him try and get over the hump and into the promised land. But I think most people would agree that the Ravens I shouldn't even say kind of, the Ravens were far less than expectations last year, both in record and output on the field, but just kind of the mindset and what we've become used to. So I think there is some rebound to Mark Andrews, but I don't know if it's a great rebound. Like, I think maybe he sneaks back in to at least fringe tight end 1 territory, 12, 13, 14, something like that. So there's a little bit of value built in, but with how this Ravens offense is running now, or at least that we know that it's running, it doesn't feel like there's a very safe floor like there used to be with Mark Andrews. And tight end's kind of one of those positions that if you're not getting touchdowns, you're chasing. And with only getting 5 and really only 3 games that he scored a touchdown, this seems like I'm going to let him pass. And I think I'd rather I think I would rather take the Aronde Gadsden in the Mike McDaniel's offense and the young, youthful player and kind of all the things that he has to offer, as opposed to a Mark Andrews kind of starting to slide a little bit in his older years. So I'm not a big fan of this. I'm not loving the fact that Lamar Jackson just isn't targeting him a whole bunch. Maybe he sees some of that come back with Likely going to New York, but I'm just not convinced that he's going to consistently see, 6 or 7 targets a game. And that's really the Mark Andrews that became fantasy relevant, was he had 6, 7 targets a game. Last year, we were seeing a boatload of games. Over half his games, he had 3 targets or less. And that's just not the area that I want to be living in when I'm drafting tight end outside of the top 12. I need some more pop than that. So Mark Andrews is a fade for me this year.
Yeah. This one here is a little tough to kind of get behind for sure, right? We've seen that kind of diminished role a little bit there, right? Although in 23, 24, and 25, right, he was in between 60 and 70 targets for each of those years, with tight end finishes of 13 overall, 5 overall, and 16 overall. The difference really comes in the touchdowns to it, right? And where you ultimately think that he's going to lie with the touchdowns. If you think that Mark Andrews can get up into the 7 or 8 touchdown range this year, you're probably going to be looking at a back end tight end 1, right? Like probably right there, tight end 11, 12 type of thing. So there may be some potential value. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to buy into that. I think that you can probably see him with around 50 receptions, 500 yards, maybe 6 touchdowns, I think is probably about where I'm going to see him on this one. And when it's all said and done, I don't know that's going to get you up into tight end 1 territory. I think that you're kind of drafting what you get at this point as far as tight end finish. So I think I'm also going to be out on Mark Andrews. There's some other guys that from a price tag standpoint, I would rather go with than Mark Andrews with where he's coming off the board and kind of that 10th, 11th round pick. I don't mind him in a 10th or 11th round pick, but there are other options that I might just kind of kick that can down the road a little bit further and see what comes of it. Any other thoughts on Mark Andrews?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the guy coming off the board, tight end 14, and that is Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert last year finished tight end number 4 overall with 82 targets, 60 receptions, and 11 touchdowns. Thoughts on Dallas Goedert?
So career high in touchdowns last year for Goddard with the 11, right? That was always kind of the big knock, is the dude never sees the end zone. Well, he got 11 of them last year. So that was a huge part of propelling him to the tight end 3 finish, correct? But a lot of those were not necessarily driving down the field or anything like that. A lot of them came inside the 5-10 yard line. They were doing some different shovel pass type work, and really it was almost vulturing touchdowns more than he was scoring touchdowns as a fantasy asset there for a while, right? Because historically when the Eagles get down that close, you're thinking tush push. And oh, by the way, they also have a guy named Saquon Barkley who's really good at football too. And they were just changing up a little bit. So I see some big time touchdown regression coming for Dallas Goedert. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him fall back into that 5, maybe 6 touchdown range, potentially even further. So I think that with where you're drafting him, I think it's probably fair compensation. I think that there's a possibility for targets with AJ Brown leaving. It does open up more targets, so you could see Dallas Goedert be more involved in the short yardage passing game. But I don't think you see as many touchdowns. And if you're dropping off 5 or 6 touchdowns from the year before, that's a ton of receptions that you're trying to catch up to. So I think this is probably fair. I hope no one's drafting him with the expectation that he's going to finish top 5 again. I feel that's unrealistic at this point. With being 31 years old, age starts to be a concerning factor. Not that he's, over the hill by any means, but Dallas Goedert consistently misses a couple games a year, right? So he's a guy who's not playing all 17, typically doesn't have a high touchdown volume on an offense that is changing yet again. And so we're not quite sure what we're going to get out of him. So all these considered, it's probably fair value, but most likely he's not going to end up on my roster.
Yeah, this is kind of a tough one to get behind, right? Because of the fact that we are seeing yet again another offensive coordinator change happen. And really, I think that that's a lot of what you can see him where you saw that massive output come through last year was the offense that Kevin Pilato ran, and then will Sean Mannion do similar types of things? That I don't know, right? Because Dallas Goedert not only more than doubled his career high in touchdowns, on a season. Previously, his career high was 5 touchdowns on the season. And he went to 11. He also set career high for receptions on this one, but also had a career low in receiving yards. So he was getting a lot of those looks and a lot of that work down in the red zone with a lot of shovel passes that kind of took place over that tush push. Will that continue? It remains to be seen. I don't know that I'm willing to bank on that one, though. I think that you're going to see a pretty good touchdown regression come through. I think that you're probably looking maybe 5 or 6 touchdowns. Even with A.J. Brown departing, I don't know that we see him get back to his career high in receptions. So we're probably looking in that 55 type of range, 500 to 550 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like, this very much seems like tight end 2 territory, which is about where you're drafting him. And I don't know that we're going to see him drastically outperform this type of deal. He'll certainly have those couple of pop weeks because he does every single year where he goes out and has, tight end 1 finish, tight end 2 finish on the week. But the overall consistency just isn't there enough for what I want out of my tight end position. And so for that, I don't know that we're going to see much of Dallas Goedert on many of my rosters. Best ball format, kind of like that one because he can give you those 2 or 3 big weeks that can go out there and win you a week, and you don't have to worry about trying to put him in your lineup. But for a fantasy and a redraft and a season-long type of format, this is the type of player that sometimes you just start pulling your hair out trying to figure out what week you're going to start him. And so that does give me a lot of concern around that one, and that's part of the reason that I won't see many rosters that have Dallas Goedert as the tight end on it. Any other thoughts on Dallas Goedert?
Next.
All right. Let's go ahead and head on over, take a look at a guy coming off the board at number 13. And, my computer, come on now. We can do this. We're going to take a look at Dalton Kincaid. And Dalton Kincaid last year finished tight end 18, 49 targets, 39 receptions, 571 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Thoughts on Dalton Kincaid?
Well, Kincaid's an interesting one. He had some big time injury issues last year, right? He couldn't get healthy, couldn't stay on the field, but he was pretty serviceable while he played in most of those games, right? He had 3, 4, 5 weeks inside the top 12, which is nice. Had a couple tight end 3 finishes, a tight end 1 finish. So if he can remain healthy, I think I like the value that you can get with Dalton Kincaid here. This is a Bills offense that doesn't have a ton, of pass catchers. They did trade for DJ Moore. Khalil Shakir is still there. We're still trying to figure out what's going on with Coleman. But there's not a dominant feed me the ball type receiver on this Bills roster. So it allows Josh Allen to kind of find that open receiver. The thing with Kincaid is Dawson Knox is a vulture. You don't think about him a whole lot, but Dawson Knox, it just seems like when you need Kincaid the most, they end up going to Knox. And They have, I would love to know what this play is called, but at least once or twice a year, right? You have Knox line up as the inline tight end, and then they run a play off to the left. Dawson Knox acts like he's going to block, slides out kind of in the flat or short passing area inside of 5 yards, and Josh Allen flips the field, hits Knox, and he runs like 35 yards for a touchdown. Like every single year they run this play at least once or twice. And for whatever reason, it always seems to score a touchdown. I know it's not always, it just feels that way. Okay. Like I don't need everybody coming up and saying, well, actually, I get it. I'm using it loosely. That being said, Knox is still a really young tight end, right? This is his fourth season coming up is where he's at. And I think we could potentially see more of a breakout. We saw the beginnings of it last year with only playing 12 games. He only played 13 the year before. So injuries, the bugaboo is a concern here. But 14 and a half yards per reception, 5 touchdowns, 12 games played, only had 49 targets, but he caught 39 of them. So that was a nice little turnaround from 24, where he was having a bit of the drops in key situations here. So I like the upside. There's potential here, like Dalton Kincaid falling to the right spot here, just outside tight end 1 territory. If I'm waiting, Kincaid's a guy I can get behind. It's a high-powered offense. They're going to score a lot of points. He has, shown that he's getting, 10 plus yards per reception for his career. So, 4 for 40, 4 for 45, somewhere in that range. And when healthy, he does score touchdowns. So he kind of hits all those factors for me of a late round guy with a high ceiling and a pretty safe floor when healthy. So I could see myself drafting Knox here, playing on the upside, and then I'm going to go back through and one of the guys that we talked about last week, maybe fill in there if I want to carry 2 tight ends on my roster, just because Kincaid to this point has not shown that he can play a full NFL season without getting dinged up a little bit.
Yeah, certainly makes sense. Dalton Kincaid is very much a proceed with caution for me on this one. Right, like you mentioned that he was very efficient last year, right? With the 39 receptions, 49 targets, 14.6 yards per reception on that. Like he was not only catching the ball and catching it at a good clip, but he was getting a ton of yards per reception on that as well, and getting down the field on that. So one of those that if that comes down, if that efficiency comes down from a yards per reception to that, he's got to start compiling a lot more catches to make up for that. The problem with that is Dalton Kincaid has missed time for each one of these seasons. He has been dealing with a knee injury. The GM Bean came out and said that his 2026 workload, meaning Dalton Kincaid's, may have to be managed a little bit here and there. And this is a deal that for a guy that with this kind of talent, having the third most snaps on his team last year at the tight end position leads me a little bit still concerned from the standpoint that we've got a guy has yet to play a full season, dealing with an injury that the GM's even talking about potentially managing his workload on that with a vulture like Dawson Knox in there. And even last year when we saw it, the most snaps that we saw in a single game was 54% of the snap share on this one, right? There was a lot of games that he was below 50%. It's going to take him drastically increasing on-field percentage, seeing some more snap shares to be able to be in there to have the opportunity to increase that workload. So love the talent, but overall, this is very much a proceed with caution for me. A guy that if I'm going to take him as my tight end 1 and go with a late round tight end dart throw, I am going to be backing that up with another tight end to potentially fill in and get a guy that has a ton of upside in there as well, right? Like, potentially a guy like a Hunter Henry, right? Like a guy that can have some upside there, can help kind of bring you through on some of that. But these are some of the things that really have to be taken into consideration around this one is, kind of how that overall is going to look on the field and where it's ultimately going to come to fruition for him. And there's just enough there that leads me to be very cautious with how I'm going to put Dalton Kincaid on any of my rosters. Any other thoughts on Dalton Kincaid?
No, he's definitely a guy that I'm putting a star next to see how training camp goes. Like, let's see how that goes, what news comes out and everything else, because you make a ton of valid points and you're not wrong about any of that. But if the GM's blowing smoke, I would sure like to be advantageous, if you will, come draft season, if they're thinking this can slide. And like you said, you pair him up, right? Like you know all this and you mitigate risk. And whether it is with a Hunter Henry, maybe it's a Chigokonkwo, maybe it's Jake Tonjes from San Francisco, right? Like knowing you may not want to keep two guys, but if we know Kittle's not starting the season, and Kittle has said as much, it's just a matter of, is it 1 week, 2 weeks? Do they put him on PUP and it becomes 4 weeks? Do they put him on IR and it's 4 to 6 weeks? Like anything like that. And then you're able to buffer, because right now you can get Tonjes for song, right? He's not getting drafted. So you can capitalize on that, get someone for free, essentially, with the last pick of your draft, just to shore up your tight end room. And then you can shuffle for the first potential quarter of the season before you have to make a decision.
Okay, I like it. Let's go ahead and head on over and talk about a guy that's coming off the board, kind of tight end 12 in a lot of cases, and that is Isaiah Likely. Isaiah Likely last year, 36 targets, 27 receptions, 307 yards, and 1 touchdown. Thoughts on Isaiah Likely?
He got paid a lot of money for having like one standout game in his entire career.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We just happened to all see that game because it was nationally televised. I don't know about this guy, Derek. Like, I want to like Isaiah Likely. He's athletic, like he can high point the ball. But he hasn't seen more than 60 targets in a season. I understand that he was playing behind Mark Andrews in kind of a run heavy Baltimore style offense, but I do wonder what this workload looks like for him. And not that he's been missing a ton of time with injuries, but there is a difference between being the second guy and being the guy. And with Malik Neighbors kind of slow to recover from his knee injury, obviously you have Jackson Dart, you have Scadaboo coming back. Likely is a good blocker. So if the offensive line doesn't gel as quickly as Harbaugh would like, maybe he keeps him in line a little bit more. And I say that only to then flip the script of, there's a reason Harbaugh brought him in. Like he had to have seen something in Baltimore and thought that, hey, this guy can be my starter. And whether Harbaugh wanted that for Likely and kept getting overruled by the front office, we'll never know. But there is something when a coach brings a young player with him who young-ish, right, coming up on his second contract, but brings him in to essentially be the guy, because the Giants didn't have any other true standouts at the tight end position. There's at least the appeal for upside. So I am cautiously optimistic. I think I'm too afraid to draft him in redraft, but I would love to have him in best ball. And again, pair him up with somebody else. But I would like to have Isaiah Likely in places, but I don't think I want the headache of trying to figure out what this New York Giants offense is going to be and how he's going to fit in and all those weeks. But I'd sure like to have him in a couple places. So I think I'd take the chickens way out, honestly, and draft him in a couple best ball leagues to enjoy in his success, and probably look somewhere else with maybe a bit more established foundation and understanding of what we're going to get going forward.
Yeah. This one is an interesting one for me, right? From the standpoint that the Giants passing attack is interesting to say the least, right? Like Malik Neighbors is your wide receiver one. However, been slow, kind of trying to come off of that ACL, right? And what does this ultimately look like for him coming back? Darius Slayton, a guy that has been in the league for a while. He's with his 8 seasons with the franchise, so we haven't really seen him stand out. Darnell Mooney is a guy that has had some fantasy relevant seasons in the past as a potential flex wide receiver 3 type of territory. Calvin Austin is a big play guy, but never materialized with his time in Pittsburgh. Malachi Fields is a guy that they drafted in the 3rd round to be a big body type of guy, but we'll have to see where he ultimately shakes out and what does that look like on this one. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr. Like this is one of those types of things that it just looking at this receiving core and the weapons for that are interesting to say the least, right? Like this is one of those when you're signing Odell Beckham to come in and try and be the guy there. There's a guy that didn't play last year. 2024 when he was with Miami, didn't start a single game. 2023 when he was with Baltimore, only started 6 games there. Like this is not the OBJ of the past on this one, and that's kind of the way that you got to feel about the rest of this receiving core. So there's a world where Isaiah Likely is the and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but there's a world in which Isaiah Likely is the 2nd most targeted guy, or even the 1st most targeted guy on this roster at the end of the season. And there's actually a likelihood for Isaiah Likely to be able to pull that off and be there. This is a guy though that I do feel like you're chasing some tight end 1 upside with this. I don't mind where he's coming off the board, and I think there's some potential value, but this is another one of those that I don't trust a Matt Nagy offense. I don't know that I trust the Giants offense overall for them to be able to go through and produce like this. So I say all of that to with him potentially having this big role in this offense to the point where he may be the 1st or 2nd most targeted player on this roster, to say that this is still one of those that it's not a slam dunk. You hit draft, you move on. It's a great value. There is a lot of kind of caution with this one here as well. I think that you're taking more of an upside shot with him than necessarily that he's going to be a locked in weekly starter for you in the 2026 season. So this is one that if you're drafting him here, good for you. You're taking some shots on some upside, but it is also one of those that you've got to be able to still look and be able to try and pivot to some other options down the road. Any other thoughts on Isaiah Likely?
No, I don't think so.
All right, let's go ahead and head on over and talk about Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson, guy kind of coming off the board, tight end 12 in a lot of cases. 11-12, right? Last year he finished as tight end number 8, 202 receptions, 102 targets, 82 receptions, 600 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Thoughts on Jake Ferguson?
So I like Jake Ferguson. Again, this Cowboys defense, as I'm sure we're going to say a lot, is slowly improving, but they're not very good. So Jake Ferguson's success last year was a bad Cowboys defense, and with CeeDee Lamb missing time, helped propel him to some of that success. So 8 touchdowns is a great number for him considering he had 0 in 2024. But it's a large part of it's going to be volume. We're going to see kind of how he finishes out for his career. He's kind of seesawed a little bit. Rookie year at 47, sophomore year at tight end 8. 2024 he's tight end 30, then back up to tight end 8 last year. So a bit of a seesaw. A large part of that is accompanied by targets. If he can hit 102 targets, seems to be his magic number, he is able to finish inside the top 10 for tight ends. If he's sub 100 targets, like he's been in 2 of the seasons, then we see a tight end 2 to 3 type finish for Jake Ferguson. So the targets are going to be a big thing. I think that there's a possibility he could flirt with 100 targets again. But I think it's going to be hard to get there. I think the Cowboys, much like with every team, there's only so many balls to go around. But CeeDee Lamb's going to demand and command, really is what it is. He's going to command a ton of targets. George Pickens is going to see a good number of targets, especially if they can figure out how to expand his route tree besides just kind of a slant. Teams were starting to pick up on that towards the end of the year, and it made life a little bit harder for Pickens. So if they're able to expand his route tree a little bit, that'll be a great thing. And then Ferguson's there in the, kind of in the middle, soaking up a bunch of that stuff. So I like Jake Ferguson. I like him again. I like him as a guy if I'm waiting on tight end. I really do. I think the potential's there. It's a team that's probably going to be trailing. So you like the fact that he's going to be getting out into routes. I think more often than not, you're happy with his snap share. It lives kind of right around that, 68 to 72 type percent of snap share for most of the time. And he is a target for Dak Prescott in the red zone. The problem is sometimes you have Schoonmaker who vultures touchdowns away from Ferguson, and you get a little frustrated there. So overall, I like him. I've been a pretty, maybe not grandstanding for Jake Ferguson since he came out, but I've been a pretty avid supporter of Jake Ferguson's. And this year it's kind of more the same. I am not sure if he's going to get up to that tight end 8 and flirt with a potential top 5. I don't think he's the focal point of the offense. So I by any stretch. So I do think that kind of goes out the window. But I think if you're waiting on tight end, and you're kind of one of those last teams to draft a tight end, I think you could do a lot worse than Jake Ferguson. So I like the potential. Realistically, I think you're going to get about where you draft him, though, by the time the season's done.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're right. I think this is very much you're drafting a fringe tight end 1, high end tight end 2 with some upside on this one. This is one of those that Jake Ferguson managed to get there from an overall points perspective on the your season long type of thing, but the points per game weren't overly great when you break it down that way. So there is some room and some some potential concern there, especially if you are going to see George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb both fully healthy and both playing all their games. So we could potentially see that tick down there, but I still think that you can probably see Jake Ferguson maybe still get that 65 to 75 receptions, around about 600 yards, 5-6 touchdowns when it's all said and done. So I think that you're going to get a kind of a similar output from what you saw last year. And I think that he can kind of get you right into that tight end 11-12 type of range. So a guy that I certainly don't mind waiting on until the 10th round and take my shot on a tight end and move around from there. So he's a guy that I kind of like kicking that can down the road and taking the shot on him here a little bit later and going for that later round tight end. Any other thoughts on Jake Ferguson?
No, sir.
Alrighty. Let's go ahead and head on over to a guy coming off the board at tight end 10 right now, and that's Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce last year finished as tight end 3 overall. 108 targets, 76 receptions, 851 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Thoughts on Travis Kelce?
At this moment in the process, Derek, you and I were talking about this pre-show. Travis Kelce's kind of the sleeper tight end, y'all. Like he just is. He's finally going at that back end of tight end 1 range. I think that realistically, if he's healthy, he's going to finish in the top 5. And I think, again, with being healthy, he has an extremely safe floor with how this Kansas City offense flows through. He is still Patrick Mahomes' security blanket. Mahomes does look for him in the red zone. Kelce is still able to break loose a little bit, but he does a really good job. Even when he's catching and sitting down, it always seems to be at about 12 yards. Is kind of just the feeling behind that for Travis Kelce. So, I think the days of 100 receptions are long past us, but I do think that we could see somewhere in that neighborhood of 75 receptions again, like he did last year, and potentially, clip, 5+ touchdowns. So very, very similar to last year where he finished tight end, 3, 5, whatever it was. I think you could see similar numbers. The Rashee Rice legal issues are still there. You'll have kind of maybe a bit more of a run focus for the Chiefs, but I think that helps the play action game with Travis Kelce and him being able to kind of sneak behind some linebackers. If the Chiefs are going to focus more on getting Kenneth Walker the football, it's going to create linebackers to creep up. Kelce's going to be able to slip behind them. So you might be able to see a couple longer plays out of him this coming season than what we saw last year. So, like I said, ton of value here in my opinion. So if I'm waiting a little bit on tight end, Travis Kelce's the tight end I'm targeting to wait on. Going off the board at tight end 10, being able to finish inside the top 5. That's plenty enough value for me. And if he's sitting on the board and I feel like I'm established enough in my running back and receiver room, I will happily grab Kelce, take the floor, and know that I'm going to have consistent points with some legit upside to at least get back inside the top 4 or 5 on any given week. I just don't think you're going to see those monstrous tight end 1 weeks like we saw back in 22 and 23.
Right. No, I agree, right? Like this is one of those that from where he's coming off the board now, I am willing to absolutely hit draft and move on at this point in the process, right? From a standpoint that there are not many tight ends out there that are going to give you this kind of floor, right? And while he may not have the ceiling that he once did, the floor at a lot of times at the tight end room is what I'm looking for, especially if I'm drafting later tight end. Where he's kind of coming off the board in that 9th, 10th round type of, kind of that 9th, 10th round type of area. Really like that from a standpoint that he's probably going to go out there and get you another 75 receptions, 800 plus yards, and a handful of touchdowns. So, this is very much kind of a rinse and repeat. And even with what we've seen kind of the tailing off as he's gotten a little bit older, even as he's gotten older and the production has diminished over these last few seasons, we still saw tight end 3 overall finish last year, tight end 6 overall finish in 2024, tight end 3 finish over in 2023 overall, right? I think that we're going to see probably a very similar production and very similar output to what we saw last year, this year. So it wouldn't surprise me that he returned some good value when this one's all said and done. And I really don't mind putting a Travis Kelce on my roster, especially with where he's coming off the board now. Any other thoughts on Travis Kelce?
No.
Alrighty, let's go ahead and head on over to a guy coming off the board as tight end 9. That's George Kittle George Kittle last year finished as tight end 13, 69 targets, 69 targets, 57 receptions, 628 yards, and 7 touchdowns in an injury-shortened season. Thoughts on George Kittle?
I'm passing over Kittle, and I'd much rather grab Kelsey, personally. We know that he's coming back from an Achilles injury, which is scary enough on top of the fact that he's 32 years old right now. I don't think, at least what history has shown us, is when Jake Tonjes fills in, he does a very good job filling in for George Kittle. So I don't think they're going to be rushing him back necessarily. The 49ers have kind of retooled their wide receiver room. So again, if Mike Evans is healthy, they have their alpha there to go along with Christian Kirk. You obviously have Christian McCaffrey. So the Niners are in a position here, they don't need to force Kittle back. And so I think that, yes, he wants to get back in play. The Niners would wisely be pretty careful in making sure that he is fully ready to get back in the swing of things. And because of that, you're not going to, if you're drafting him at 8 overall, you're not getting that 17 games. So you need to do one of two things. You're either drafting George Kittle, knowing that in the last pick of your draft, you're going to grab Jake Tonjes and just take the 49ers receiving room. And I would advocate for that. Or you're having to spend another pick relatively close to George Kittle, right? If you're grabbing him or the 8th or the 9th, then you're probably turning back around in the 12th round and grabbing another guy that you can fill in for however many weeks until Kittle's able to play, and then hoping that this Achilles injury doesn't slow him down enough to where it makes it where you're not seeing the decline on the fantasy end, right? So there's just too many variables for me. I like George Kittle. I like the energy that he brings to the game. He's a fun guy to watch, and I wish him the best in his recovery. But for my fantasy team, I would rather pass over George Kittle for this season and grab Travis Kelce, the guy we just talked about, Dalton Kincaid even. And again, another guy who has some injury issues, but I'll take the youth on that side of things and hope that he's able to kind of shine through, as opposed to Kittle. And then I know to start the season, I'm playing tight end roulette. Like, that's just a crummy way for me personally to want to start a season, is knowing I have this guy. He's just going on my IR, sitting on a bench spot, and I'm already playing musical tight ends, even though I spent an 8th round pick on the guy.
Yeah, this is George Kittle's a straight up just fade for me this year. Like, hard pass on this one when it comes to drafting him. I get that a lot of folks out there are saying that, hey, this is a guy that, if he's back to form by midseason, he can be a difference maker down the stretch for you and can be a difference maker in the fantasy playoffs. And I'm not going to argue with the fact that yes, there's a world that can happen. However, I'm very willing to be wrong on that world happening, right? Achilles and ACLs, right? Like we've seen these injuries happen a fair bit over the last few seasons, and most of these guys take a while to come back, right? Where it's really in that 9 to 12 months before they really start seeing the field again and start going. This happened wild card weekend, right? Like, it's going to be it will take some time for that to come through. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but we have heard some of those reports coming out that that even Kittle himself saying that he's not going to be ready come week 1, right? So even if he does go to the pup and is back after week 4, what does that workload look like? It very well may likely be a managed type of workload coming back through there. So again, right, like that then kind of pushes that further into it, where you're hoping now that he might return to a workload in that the 8th, 9th week, and then depending upon how the Niners season's going as well, right? Like, if they're not performing very well, if they're out of those types of things, they may just kind of shut him down, right? So there's that kind of risk that's in there as well to preserve the long term. But just like when go ahead.
Just to key off of that, I would rather try and trade for him as he's coming back from injury, because if it takes a little bit longer, maybe the owner who had him is getting antsy, and you're able to, kick a deal over to them and acquire Kittle right as he's coming back, as opposed to taking up a roster spot, a valuable roster spot at the beginning of the season, where inevitably we're all going to miss someone and they pop, and you're going to want some guy on your roster, but you can't move Kittle, and they don't want to drop him and put in that situation. So much to what you're talking about. Maybe a trade candidate at that point. Like, try and put a package together if you think he's going to be the winner for the back half of the season for your team. But at the front half of the season, he's going to be a loser if you're drafting him this high, like, because he's just not going to be on the field.
Right. So I mean, there's a lot of concern with this one as well, and not only that, but this is a guy that or that injury type, or a lot like with when we see guys get the ACLs. It's I don't want any part of that the year that they come back. I'm looking more at year 2 and beyond, where I want to start messing with that thing. So this is one of those that I am pretty much just playing out on George Kittle this year. And I'm very willing to just be wrong on that one there. So, as you've said, I would personally just pass that one by and take Travis Kelce about a half round later and feel very good about that one. Any other thoughts on George Kittle?
No.
All right, let's go ahead and head on over and take a look at Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta last year, tight end 27, 49 targets, 40 receptions, 489 yards, 3 touchdowns. Thoughts on Sam Laporta?
Yeah, I'm kind of a mixed bag on Laporta this year. So I know he was dealing with some back injury, right, and missed the back half of the season. He was serviceable in the front half of the season last year, right? Had a couple, had 3 top 5 finishes, another finish that was just outside the top 5. So, and that was all in 9 games. So he was on track to be, at least valuable for your team. But I'm just concerned with what Detroit has lost on this offensive line and what they're putting on Gibbs or St. Brown. Now you have JMO, and they're continuing to expand his route tree and make him a bigger deal. Like, I think Laporta finishes just outside the top 12 here. So I don't know that there's any value with Sam Laporta. I think you could get a couple really high-end weeks, and there's going to be a couple weeks throughout the season where I think he could kind of push your team over the edge, and you get a victory out of it because of him. Other than that, you just really want him to stay healthy, which I think last year might have been the anomaly, but back issues are kind of funky for tight ends, right? They're down in a stance, they get hit, a lot of times in the back, just based off of how their routes typically work and kind of coming over the middle. So I'm very cautious with Sam Laporta. And again, if it's between Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce, I'm going to take Travis Kelce because I understand what Andy Reid's offense is. It's nothing against Laporta. It's just I'm going with the better known commodity at that point. Now, if you're a Lions fan or if you just really like Sam Laporta and you want him, okay, there's some potential there. There just is. I understand that. I think the back injury kind of has me a little weary at the moment, so I would be fading him and Kittle both and skipping all the way down and grabbing a Travis Kelce. Even though he's older, he's been kind of the consistency of health for a tight end position that gets a lot of guys nicked up.
No, it certainly makes sense, right? This is a this is a player that I'm still trying to figure out how I want to view this one. Because there's lots of pluses and lots of not so goods, right? So right as not so good, right? You already mentioned with the back injury, things like that, like that cut the season short last year and cut it short by about half the season. So you know those can be a bit of a tricky thing, and yeah, is he completely past it? Is he not? Tough to say, right? Because we haven't really seen much come out in the way of reports around the injury and what he's what he's looking like. So this is one of those that I'm definitely keeping an eye on how he looks in training camp and the reports coming out from that and what that looks like. And if it's if things aren't trending up, it's a fade for me, right? But if it's coming back and say these that he's fully healthy, all of that, then yes, that starts moving the dial on that one. The fact that we see Drew Petzing also come into this as the offensive coordinator is a potential plus for Sam Laporta, right? Drew Petzing was the offensive coordinator in Arizona the last couple of years, where we saw Trey McBride just explode with usage on this one. Now, Arizona does not have the same type of wide receiver room that the Lions do. So one could argue that the right, you mentioned the line issues for the Lions, but still a far better line than what the Cardinals have been running the last couple of years. But this is one of those that even with all of that, I do think Amon-Ra and Jameson Williams potentially limit the upside and the volume that Sam Laporta can see. So that is a potential kind of downside there. One of the other potential upsides is that he was tight end number 7 in points per game last year before getting hurt. So you're kind of getting him about from a point per game perspective, you're kind of drafting him what you're getting on that one, and that's a very nice kind of floor, so to speak, on this one. So with kind of some of the ups and downs and all of that, this is one of those that I'm definitely keeping an eye on as we head into the camps and as we get going through this. He's not a fade, but he's not a buy yet for me either. This is very much one of those that I'm going to kind of just star and keep a very heavy eye on and see what that looks like when it comes to when it comes to me being on the clock, because there are several pluses, but there's also several minuses on this one. And if I'm looking at it overall, I do like a couple of guys from a draft capital perspective a little bit later on, but this is still a guy that has the talent to potentially give you a top, a top 3, top 2 type of finish on the end of the season. So this is a wait and see for me. Any other thoughts on Sam Laporta?
I think the only thing I'm going to add is he's a guy that I would probably wait around too long, right, from where he's going. Like I want someone else to make that decision. And if I have a running back or wide receiver or even a quarterback on the board, I might go there in the round where I should draft Laporta and just see what the rest of my league mates do about it. Do they draft him? Do they dance around him? And then come back? Because if they dance around him and they're grabbing, if Kelsey goes, right, but the Laporta stays on the board, okay, then I'll probably grab him, but it'd be around, I would view it as a round discount at that point, as opposed to jumping up around to get him before any of my league mates could.
Okay, I like it. Let's go ahead and head on over to a guy coming off the board at tight end number 7. That is Kyle Pitts. Last year, Kyle Pitts finished tight end number 2, 118 targets, 88 receptions, 928 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Thoughts on Kyle Pitts?
When I write him off, he finally does it. I mean, I don't know how else to phrase that. I sat high on that bandwagon for multiple years, trying to, will this into victory, and it just never quite came. And I wrote him off last year. Do not draft him. I'm fading him. And I did. And then he finishes tight end 2. Like, I'm worried about the quarterback situation and whether it's Penix or Tua. right now it seems like it's Tua from what the early reports are that we're seeing. So we'll see if that continues. The good thing about Tua is he did something similar with Jonnu and did support a really healthy Jonnu Smith. And maybe that will be best because Tua's arm is not explosive. So it does lead towards more favorable tight end routes than deep routes on uh, between the numbers and the sideline. So I am probably not buying this. Like Atlanta outside of Bijan Robinson this year for me just seems like a death trap for, wishing for fantasy points. So for me, I think I'd be looking at other areas. I'm willing to be wrong on him this year. I'm not a complete fade, but I'm not searching him out. If that makes sense. And I'm okay with that. I've come to terms with that. I think I like the passing volume of a couple teams more than what I think, or passing consistency maybe of a couple teams that we just talked about more so than I like with the Atlanta Falcons this year. And so because of that, Kyle Pitts is just not a guy that's on my must-have list. Like I'm going to have to get a pretty good value on Kyle Pitts here to be able to pull that trigger and suffer through Tua Tagovailoa or Michael Penix being the quarterback that I need to support his fantasy success.
Certainly makes sense, right? Like this was a deal that it's kind of interesting on how that one kind of comes to play, right? Because of how that shook out, right? Like Drake London started missing time about week 12 on that, which is where we saw Kyle Pitts really kind of ascend through the last bit of the season on this one. And with Kyle Pitt without Drake London in the in that wide receiver one position for the team, we saw Kyle Pitts have a drastic uptick in overall target share, the first read going through him. Like they started moving the offense through him without Drake London on the field. When Drake London is on the field, that drastically decreases and goes the Drake London route. So that does lead me to quite a bit of caution from a standpoint that, a lot of this thing was first half was okay. We really saw him take off during the second half, but the second half was also without Drake London on the field for a lot of that. And when he did come back, he was still injured and not performing up to, a lot of what we saw out of Drake London. So this is a deal that does give me a little bit of pause, a little bit of concern on this one. The fact that you do have a receiving back or running back that has the receiving chops that Bijan Robinson does. I do think that if Tua is the guy, you may start seeing that even more checkdowns to Bijan than the checkdowns going into Kyle Pitts on this one. The quarterback situation gives me a little bit of pause. The offensive coordinator and head coaching standpoint give me a little bit of pause on this one as well. I think that there's some value here, but I ultimately think that you're going to get what you draft, and I think the range of outcomes, you're looking at him finishing inside the top 5 with the same likelihood of him finishing tight end 10 through 15. Like I see the outcomes as equally kind of measured out there. And so one of those that you draft that I think you have as likely of a chance of you being extremely happy with the top 5 finish as you do with being extremely disappointed with the 10 to 15 overall finish on the season. So this is one of those that I'm going to proceed with a lot of caution in this one and really pay a lot of attention to who the quarterback is come week 1. Any other thoughts here on Kyle Pitts?
No, kind of might be the most polarizing tight end that we have on our list here tonight.
Yeah, just a bit. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the guy coming off the board. In a lot of cases, tight end 6. That's Tucker Kraft. Last year, Tucker Kraft, tight end 21 in an injury-shortened season, 44 targets, 32 receptions, 489 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Tucker Kraft?
Tucker Kraft's a fade for me this year. I'll keep this one short and sweet. The ACL injury, this Green Bay offense is kind of free flowing. They're not necessarily hyper targeting one guy over the other. Even with the Josh Jacobs news and potentially making Jordan Love more or Matt LaFleur more of a pass centric offense than maybe what he was planning on. Right now, Jacobs is available and he's with the team as they're kind of working through this. But nevertheless, Tucker Kraft was great while he was there last year, and it was really unfortunate that he got hurt because he was on a really nice trend and a really nice path to be really tight end 2 for the season before he got hurt. So big time bummer. But he might have 6 touchdowns all of next year if he's lucky, right? Because of how Green Bay spreads this out. So I'm not willing to pay that for Tucker Kraft. I would be closer to going towards a Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, than Kraft. And again, a large part of that's coming off the injury. Like, I just want to see him kind of get back there and up to speed and everything else. And I'm not willing to spend the draft capital needed on Tucker Kraft when I have some other options further down the list that I like just as much.
Right. Yeah. No, this is one of those that I am, again, proceeding with caution on this one. Again, right. This is coming off the ACL tear. Oftentimes this is an injury that the year a player comes back on that one, I'm not really that interested in having them on my fantasy roster. I want this the year after, right? The year after they return, and really that's where you tend to see them kind of come back to full strength and really peak performance on that one. So next year, Tucker Kraft is probably an absolute buy for me, and I can't, smash the yes button fast enough when it comes to draft night. But this year, it's where he's coming off the board in that, tight end 6. You're having to spend a 6th or 7th round capital on that one. I would rather be filling out depth in some of my other positions and kick this can down the road, and take a guy like Travis Kelce several rounds later, 4 or 5 rounds later in a lot of cases, to the point where I feel like I can probably get similar output, similar production on this one. So, Tucker Kraft is a guy that can give you a great big upside on this one, but another guy that I'm just plain willing to be wrong about it this year. Any other thoughts on Tucker Kraft?
No, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and head on over to a guy coming off the board at tight end number 5. In a lot of cases, Harold Fannin. And last year, Harold Fannin finished tight end 6, 107 targets, 72 receptions, 731 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Harold Fannin Jr.?
So I'm kind of torn on Harold Fannin. In one hand, I want to fade it. Like, great rookie season, but we still don't really have any sort of definitive quarterback solution. We have a new head coach and offensive philosophy coming in there. So it's not going to be quite the same as it was last year with Stefanski and his crew. On the flip side, the head coach coming in there is Todd Monken, and he is the one who kind of made Brock Bowers at the University of Georgia. So you could see some similar ways of scheming Fannin open as he did for Bowers. I don't know that the Browns offensive line is good enough to necessarily drive the ball down the field, so he could get a lot of short yardage dump offs. So I'm torn on Fannin a little bit. I think push comes to shove, I think this is a bit of an overpay for Harold Fannin. I think that there's extremely high likelihood that he could end up inside the top 12 and maybe even inside the top 10. But I think here at tight end 5 coming off the board, it's a little rich for my blood. And again, much later in the draft, I could take a Travis Kelce who has years and years and years of consistency under his belt. And not to mention, I get basically 4, maybe 5 rounds worth of a discount and have very similar production by the time the year is done and over with.
Right. Yeah, this is one that I've kind of gone back and forth on this one, right? Because Harold Fannin, last year kind of saved my tight end room in several leagues on this one, and really, really kind of want to see that duplicated, and really want to believe that that's able to kind of play out there. But a lot of that comes from the standpoint too that that was where Shadur Sanders looked for a lot of those targets, a lot of those reads was just the dump off to Harold Fannin, and away you go, right? And Todd Monken coming in, right? He does have the tight end, right? Not only working there with Brock Bowers down there at Georgia, but then went to the Baltimore Ravens where he managed to coach both Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews, and we saw some production out of both of those guys at the tight end position there. So his offense tends to be one that is favorable towards a tight end. And Harold Fannin's a guy that's may very well be one of the better offensive weapons on this Browns offense. But the fact that they went out and spent early draft capital on Casey Concepcion and Denzel Boston, that's some more mouths to feed in there, and high draft capital that was brought in to compete and all of that. This is one of those that I'm having a hard time buying into the tight end 5 overall, or the tight end 5 overall coming off the board in that 5th to 6th round. Like, it just gets really, really rich for my blood at that point. I want to believe in the talent and the output this year. I just am going to have a hard time putting him on my roster with where he's coming off the board. So I don't know. I probably won't have him on many rosters. Just the price is gonna be price prohibitive for me on that draft capital. Any other thoughts on this one?
No, sir.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at Tyler Warren coming off the board at tight end 4. Tyler Warren last year finished at tight end 5, 112 targets, 76 receptions, 817 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Thoughts on Tyler Warren?
I like Tyler Warren. I think he's one of the few guys not named Bowers or McBride that could at least flirt with tight end 1 by the end of the season. The Colts made some offseason moves. They brought Daniel Jones back, but they're let go of Michael Pittman. They paid Alec Pierce a ton of money. Josh Downs is still there. Jonathan Taylor's still there too. But even through all of it last year, and after Daniel Jones went down, Tyler Warren still saw consistent targets. He's absolutely a focal point of this offense and kind of what the Colts want to do in being able to control the clock, be methodical going down the field, and just kind of wear you out a little bit. So if I'm looking for early-ish tight end, but I don't want to spend that 2nd or 3rd round value on a Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, I think I could happily pick up Tyler Warren in the late 4th, early 5th, if I was dead set on going tight end early. Like, if that was just a strategy that I wanted, I like Warren. I think he has enough upside again to compete with the number 1 tight end spot by the time the season's done and over with. Personally, I'm probably going to wait. I just don't like spending draft capital on early tight ends. That's a personal choice, but I'm not going to knock anybody who decides to go Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I can understand that one for sure. This is one that, right? Like, this is a guy that likely that very well could be the number 1 targeted or the most targeted guy on his roster here. The problem is that where are we going to be at with Daniel Jones for his recovery on this one, right? Like, that is really kind of where this comes to be, right? Because Daniel Jones also coming off an Achilles injury suffered last year. For the Yeah, and what does that kind of look like right now? The last two quarterbacks we've seen that had the Achilles injury and all of that. We've seen that where they lost some zip, they lost some pop, but they tended to be a little bit older in there as well too. So it's tough to say if that was age kind of catching up there, or if it was the injury or combination of the two. So there's a good chance that we see Anthony Richardson out there come week 1, and yeah, if for those weeks, I think I like the Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, somebody that's going to get 50 yards down the field type of thing to do that. But we've seen what the Anthony Richardson experience looks like when him trying to complete a ball 5 to 10 yards down the field and it ends up in the dirt as much as it doesn't. So that does give me some pause around Tyler Warren. I think that this is a guy that can deliver where he's coming off the board. This is a guy that wouldn't surprise me to see him in the top 5 tight end finish when it's all said and done. But the problem starts becoming too is where the draft capital is coming off the board, right? He's starting to come off the board, and a lot of times that 4th, maybe even to the 5th round. And that starts getting a little too rich on how I like to construct teams and how I like to build rosters out. And from an overall depth perception or depth type of positional at the tight end deal, I don't know that I'm looking to spend a 4th round capital on a guy like Tyler Warren to get a guy that's going to go out there and get me 10 points a game. Any other thoughts on Tyler Warren?
No, sir.
All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at the guy coming off the board as the tight end number 3, and that is Colston Loveland. Last year, Colston Loveland finished tight end 12, 82 targets, 58 receptions, 713 yards, 6 touchdowns. Thoughts on Colston Loveland?
I feel like this is a bit rich for Loveland. Now, I think he can finish inside the top 10. I just don't like him at tight end 3. There's a ton of mouths to feed in Chicago right now. So it's going to be a challenge for him to get the number of touchdowns necessary to really flirt with this tight end 3 ranking that he has here at the moment. But again, I like him as a top 10, but I'm not going to spend early draft capital on him. Like, he's going to have to fall to where I want him to fall to really be happy, I think, with what I can get. I like him more than a Kittle. I like him more than a Laporta. And I think maybe it falls somewhere in that range for me, though. Like, him or Harold Fannin might be an interesting toss-up for me. I think because of the quarterback position, I would go Loveland because I trust Caleb Williams more so than I trust anything Cleveland's putting out. And then we go back down to Travis Kelce, right? We keep going back to this name. Like, I mean, I kind of like Kelce a bit more than Loveland. Like, I'll just take the consistency of it. There's not as many mouths to feed there. Maybe if I'm trying to be different and I have Kelce, like, I could see the two of them kind of being side by side. Maybe by the time I get everything done with and the rankings and whatnot. So, or how I think they're going to finish. So maybe they're close to it. That would put Loveland right around tight end 5, which is possible in a Ben Johnson offense. We saw tight end 1 and a tight end 7 finish out of Sam Laporta when Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator there in Detroit. So we know his offense can support this. But I just think 3's a little rich for my blood, as much as I like Ben Johnson here. So if I'm not going for a McBride or a Bowers, I don't think I'm going to settle for Loveland. I think I will pivot, go somewhere else, and get a really solid second running back or wide receiver at that point, and then look at tight end later.
Yeah, where he's coming off the board in that 3rd round, like that is very high draft capital to be spending. And again, for a guy that's might get you 10 to 12 points on this one, right? Like, that's my second running back. That's my second wide receiver, maybe even my first wide receiver, depending upon how the draft board is shaken out for me at that point. And if I'm going to be drafting a tight end at this point, he's got to be able to outperform the rest of the tight ends below him at a pace significant enough that it's going to make up the difference that I'm going to lose out on by waiting another round or two for one of those other positional makers where, so it's a tough deal to try and get around and try and beat on this one. You're really hoping that for Colson Loveland, you're really hoping that the Bears managed to keep up the 4 games that we last saw him in, the last 2 of the regular season, and then the playoffs there as well, where he got more than 10 targets in each one of those games. I think that the likelihood of him being able to get 10 plus targets in each in games coming up this season, or even average 7 or 8 targets a game, is very low on this one, to the point where, right, like last year when he was going through that stretch, he was really cooking from a target share perspective. This is one of those that Roma Dunze being full healthy, Luther Burden being there, and I think we see Luther Burden emerge a little bit and be a more of a focal point this year as being their wide receiver 2 instead of the wide receiver 3. This is a deal that I think we see Colson Loveland's target share. I think we're going to be hard pressed to see him see more than 20% of the target share in this one. So at that point, this one is way too rich for me, and I'll be looking at other places to spend my 3rd round draft capital. Any other thoughts on Colson Loveland?
No, I don't think so. Now back to your point about the targets. Crystal ball, like if you knew he was getting a consistent target number each week, what's that target number for you to where you feel like that 3 justifies it? Is it 6 a game?
Oh no, it has to be 8 or 9 minimum.
You're getting 8 or 9, and here's the thing though, 8 or 9 targets, you're getting up to the 135, 140 targets to justify that tight end 3. It's possible, right? Again, Bowers McBride, you've seen it get up that high. But we've seen guys do a lot more with a lot less.
True.
Like, I think 7's my number personally. That puts you right around 120 targets.
Okay. If you can tell me that he's going to get 120 targets, okay, I'll bite on that one, and I would say okay, I'll take the shot at that point. But which at that point, right, you're probably talking to a point where your tight end's going to be getting you 10 or 11 points per game, right? Like if you've seen 7 targets, kind of how everything else, you're probably talking in that 10, 11 points per game. To do that, where on the flip side of that, from
I'd still rather have like Mike Evans. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, that's where I was
still much rather have a Mike Evans, even with the hamstring injury being an alpha in San Francisco, or potentially Jalen Waddle, Devonta Smith, that type of, you're talking 3rd round, like maybe George Pickens. I think that's a little rich for him personally, but he's going to see over 100 targets in Dallas. So I'm completely picking up with what you're putting down. I'm just making the argument for the people who like to go tight end early and feel like that's their difference maker. Yes, 3 points a week do add up over the course of a season, but I'm not convinced it's a 10 plus touchdown guy, at least this year. Now, 7 targets a game. If he's 120 targets and you're guaranteed 10 touchdowns, maybe I take the flyer on it and just hope the receptions and the yards just kind of magically figure themselves out between the 120 targets and the 10 touchdowns. But 102 targets and 6 touchdowns that's not quite there for me. Like, that's good, but that's not top 3.
Yeah, if you're going to tell me that he's going to get 10 plus touchdowns, okay, sign me up. I'm in, right? Like at that point, the touchdowns will outweigh anything else to the point where that will get you that'll get you a tight end 3 type of finish over the course of the season, right? Like I can absolutely kind of get behind that one, but yeah, again, this is a deal that I have a hard time believing that we're going to see him really kind of merge to that point. And yeah, even with that, right? Like Kyle Pitts had 120 targets last year. Yeah, would you rather take a Kyle Pitts with like a third round, like knowing that kind of production last year with 120 targets versus a guy that, wide receiver that you could pick up in the third round? I would almost always go wide receiver, and I would almost always go running back in those situations. So
I agree. Okay. You and I draft very similarly in that aspect.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and take a look here at the next guy on the list, and that's the guy coming off the board, number 2, Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers last year, overall 9 on the tight end finish, 86 targets, 64 receptions, 680 yards, and 7 touchdowns. Thoughts on Brock Bowers?
No, I was down. I was high on Brock Bowers his rookie year. I was down on him last year, and you and I were both on the McBride bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm back on the Bowers wagon this year.
Okay.
So just to kind of give you an idea, I like what the Raiders have done. I like what they've brought in. I think they're going to be a bit more competitive. I think Mendoza's going to be able to connect with Bowers early and often. And as long as the offensive line holds up and Mendoza can stay upright, I think Bowers is going to see a ton of targets. So for my money, I would rank Bowers ahead of McBride. For this exercise, McBride is the one guy we haven't talked about, right? So he's going to be ranked higher than Bowers. So I have a hard time swallowing the price tag. It's not the talent, it's not the situation, it's simply the price tag, and we're not talking about a Travis Kelce versus the rest of the field, or a Rob Gronkowski there for a couple years, right? Versus the rest of the field. The field's actually pretty close when you think about it, right? Like it took a really special season for Trey McBride last year, and he still wasn't close to the numbers that Kelce put up back in 21 and
22 and
22, yeah. So it just that. There's not enough of a separation for me to say, yes, this is the guy I want to go get in the second round and plant my flag, as opposed to grabbing, again, a Tyler Warren, right? If he's kind of that last one that you have there in that tier, maybe I do take the last guy in the tier and I'm good with it. But the top 4 or 5 tight ends being Bowers, McBride, Warren, Loveland, and I'm putting Kelce in there until he's not. Like he's earned that. It is my opinion. So I'm even at his discounted rate that you and I talked about earlier. There's without a really special season, there's not a whole lot separating those guys. So again, why pay second or third round value when you could get something similar, even if you won the youth in a 4th or maybe 5th, if you could get Warren to slide, or you wait another 4 rounds and you could get Kelce and do that. So it's hard. There's no clear-cut solution. I like Brock Bowers. I really like him and have since he was on the field at Georgia. And I think I talked about him 2 or 3 years before he came out in the draft. It's just the price tag associated with it, Derek. Like I just can't spend a second or third round tag on a tight end. There's not that much of a difference between tight end 3 and tight end 10, right? 1 is a special season or really good season. 2 had a very strong season, maybe just didn't quite have as many touchdowns. But between 3 and 10, there's not a whole lot of separation, right? You're talking the difference of 2 touchdowns, and who's going to predict those correctly? Not me. I try, but I'm not going to do it. And so it's just not worth the headache. Again, I'm looking at a running back, Saquon Barkley in the second round instead of one of these top 2 tight ends, potentially Saquon, right? Or something similar to that, even in the third round. Like, do I go back and look at, like we were talking about earlier, like a George Pickens, like possibly, it's easier path to targets, whether
Right.
he's the number 2 in Dallas or not. So, like the guy, I don't like the price tag, so he's the guy that is most likely not going to end up on my rosters this year because I don't see the value in drafting tight end that early.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Right, second, third round, it gets really tough for me to hit the draft button. Like even on last year, right? Like as gung ho as I was about Trey McBride, and anybody can go back and rewind the tapes, and I said flat out he'd lead the Cardinals in receptions for the or receptions and targets last year, and he would be up there from a volume king standpoint. And sure enough, he delivered, right? And at 14.9 points a game, right, he put up Travis Kelce, like prime Travis Kelce-esque performance on that, and was a big positional difference maker at the position. I had maybe one team that had Trey McBride on my roster, right? Like that was even with knowing, or that was even with my belief on what that was going to look like. I just have a hard time pulling the trigger on a tight end in the second, third round because of how that roster then looks. And I feel like I'm constantly chasing either running back or constantly chasing wide receiver for the rest of that. And I just don't ever feel like I catch up on that one, on how that looks, versus waiting and just picking up a tight end at that, in that 9th, 10th, 11th round type of thing. And, some of that just comes down to how you like to construct rosters. For anybody that wants to have that tight end early, to have the difference maker, you go through that. Yeah, Brock Bowers is a guy to spend that capital on. And yes, I believe that he can deliver and be that top, I think it's going to be him and McBride that are pushing each other to see who finishes tight end number 1. I do like the reports coming out of Las Vegas that they're going to find multiple ways to try and get him involved this year and trying to use him. And I think that with the lack of receivers in Vegas there as well, that will only benefit Brock Bowers more so. But I say all of that to still say that I don't know that I'll have any Brock Bowers on my roster when it's all said and done at the end of this draft season. Any other thoughts on Brock Bowers?
No, cosign.
All right, let's go ahead and head over to a guy coming off the board at tight end 1, and that is Trey McBride, who finished last season at tight end number 1, 169 targets, 126 receptions, 1,239 yards, and 11 touchdowns. Thoughts on Trey McBride?
Much the same thing as Bowers. I like Trey McBride. I like that he's the focal point of this offense. I don't love that we're not necessarily sold on what this quarterback position looks like. But regardless of, I don't think he sees 169 targets again. I think we do see some sort of regression on that. 11 touchdowns is a big number to duplicate, especially for a tight end. So I feel like there's much more area for him to fall back down just a little bit than there is for him to replicate or exceed what he did in 2025 on top of the draft capital. So I like the player. I like his situation. I don't love what I have to pay for him. So I am most likely going to be looking at other avenues instead of at Trey McBride.
Right. This is also an offense that saw a changeover at the head coaching position, offensive coordinator. They spent very high draft capital on a running back. And so a team that was hucking the ball constantly last year. I think we'll see some different things play out there, and we'll see maybe a little bit more of a balanced attack this year. That can certainly cut into some of that. But it is going to be hard to maintain some of these monster numbers and monster output that he had, right? Like Trey McBride only trailed Puka Nacua last year in overall receptions when it was all said and done, right? Like he put up more receptions than wide receivers did, right? Like that's going to be a hard number to duplicate. That is prime Travis Kelce-esque type of performance and that kind of difference maker that you can have at that position. So if you're going to be spending a draft pick on the second, third round on a tight end, you need that kind of difference maker where he is 5 to 6 points better than the next best option that you possibly could have had in there over the course of the season on that one. I do think that this one's going to be a season where we see both Brock Bowers and Trey McBride really kind of push each other all season long to see who does finish as tight end one. But again, this is a same thing that I'm going to say about Brock Bowers. Due to the draft capital and how I like to construct teams, I don't know that I'm going to have much Trey McBride on my roster. I do think that he'll be either tight end 1, tight end 2. I do think that we'll see another fantastic performance on this one. I just don't love the draft capital. Any other thoughts on Trey McBride?
No, cosign.
All right, awesome. Well, that's going to take us down here to the end of it. Any final thoughts out there for the viewers and listeners?
Quarterbacks and tight ends have now been officially completed. So, feel free to go over to YouTube, check out those episodes. If you guys have any initial questions or missed what we had to say about, potentially your favorite player. But as always, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. While you're over at YouTube, hit like and subscribe. It goes a long way to help us out here. But other than that, y'all be good. We'll see you next week.
All right. We did have one comment. We'll hit this one up real quick. This one from Brian over on YouTube saying Colson was the 10th overall pick and Ben Johnson's first player drafted. He could lead the Bears in targets.
I will take the under.
So will I. There's always
I understand the optimism. I'm simply saying I'll take the under.
Right. There's always that chance. But again, this is, I think 7 targets a game is a little rich for me still, even when we were talking through that one. But I like the thought, and I can appreciate you rooting hard there for it. But that's going to do it for us tonight. As Kevin mentioned, make sure that you're hitting us up on the socials, hitting the like, subscribe button wherever you're consuming the content. Appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in. That's going to do it for us tonight. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloos.